Today, we have a really fascinating stack of sources centered around a single, highly pivotal moment in time.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Right. It's the July 27, 2026 Philippine State of the Nation address delivered by President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Now, real quick, our mission today isn't to take political sides or, endorse any particular ideology.
Exactly. We're just looking at the facts.
Right. We are here to impartially unpack the actual data points, the physical policies, and the massive strategic pivots laid out in this text. We really want to understand the exact trajectory this country is charting.
And I mean, it is an incredibly complex trajectory. Usually when we look at the development of a nation, we sort of expect a somewhat linear timeline.
Wait, a step-by-step thing.
Right. You pour the foundation, frame the walls, and maybe decades later, you install the state-of-the-art smart home system. It's sequential. You don't usually put solar panels on a roof that hasn't even been built yet.
Exactly. But when you look at the roadmap laid out in this 2026 address, that linear timeline just entirely shatters.
Yeah, it really does.
We are looking at a landscape that is experiencing entirely different centuries all at once. Okay, let's unpack this. What is the overarching theme or strategy we are actually looking at in this text?
Well, the core tension of this address is a nation fighting a two-front war on its own timeline. So, on one hand, the government is attempting to transition out of reactive crisis management.
Dealing with the old problems, right?
Yeah, deeply rooted traditional problems like agricultural debt, massive typhoons, and immediate economic relief. But simultaneously, they are aggressively positioning themselves in the global high-tech value chain. They are pushing for predictive governance. They are quite literally trying to fix the plumbing while launching a rocket into space.
We mean that literally, which we will definitely get to later. But before any nation can look at the stars, they have to put out the fires on the ground. So, the source material starts heavily focused on the immediate bleeding, triggered by both domestic corruption and a major global crisis. The address kicks off with this massive reallocation of domestic funds. They initiated an anti-corruption sweep focused specifically on flood control projects.
Yes, and the scale they outline there is, well, it's significant. According to the address, they conducted a deep investigation that led to charges against high-level contractors, officials, and lawmakers.
Wow.
Yeah, this even includes an impending case against a former speaker. Through this sweep, the state managed to recover, freeze, or preserve nearly 5 billion pesos in assets and funds.
5 billion.
Right, and over 30 million of that has already been returned directly to the national treasury.
But those recovered funds immediately collided with a massive external shock, right?
Oh.
A state of national energy emergency caused by the war in the Middle East.
Yeah, the timing was intense.
And reading through the sources, it wasn't just about oil prices spiking. It was a staggering human logistical nightmare. They had to swiftly repatriate over 140,000 overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs, from the Middle East.
Which is an incredible shock to the system. Repatriating 140,000 people isn't just about chartering flights. When OFWs come home abruptly, the remittance money they normally send back stops flowing into the country.
That hurts the national GDP.
Exactly. So absorbing them back into the local economy immediately is totally vital. The government provided financial aid and livelihood programs, but the most striking move was taking returning OFW teachers and integrating them directly into the public school system to fill critical domestic shortages.
Oh, that's smart. It's a clever way to solve two problems at once. But grounding this back to the listeners, so what does this all mean for the average person? It's one thing to say billions were recovered from corrupt contractors, but how did they actually inject that financial sandbag into a struggling household?
Well, they deployed highly targeted immediate relief mechanisms. First, they released 58 billion pesos directly to local government units.
To bypass the national bottleneck.
Right, by bypassing the central bureaucracy and going straight to the local level, they sped up the rollout of aid. They suspended the excise tax on LPG and kerosene for 3 months and worked to roll back oil prices gradually to prevent sudden consumer shock at the pump.
Make it more manageable.
Exactly. But the most vital intervention was food and finance. They physically distributed 26,000 tons of rice to 2.5 million families. And they're aiming to eventually reach 8 million families.
That is a massive logistical lift. And I noticed in the sources they also intervened directly with the banking sector. They pushed banks and digital e-wallets to drop online transaction fees, which, immediately leaves a little more change in people's pocket.
Every bit helps.
Right. And more importantly, they secured up to a 6-month pause on loan payments, whether that was for housing, agriculture, or personal debt.
The psychological strategy here is very clear. You have to stabilize the working class first. You act as a tourniquet to stop the immediate financial bleeding.
Right.
Until you remove that immediate everyday panic about putting food on the table, you simply cannot roll out any long-term systemic reforms. The public just won't accept them.
So they've managed to stabilize the immediate crisis with cash relief and suspended loan payments. But, I mean, you and I both know a country can't run on emergency tourniquets forever. How are they pivoting to actually fix the structural cracks that made the economy so vulnerable in the first place? Because that leads us directly into the economic shields and disaster-proofing they detailed next.
Exactly. Once the panic subsides, you have to build better shields. The economic adjustments proposed in the address are quite aggressive. For the workforce, they propose exempting income tax entirely for anyone earning up to 350,000 pesos annually.
That's a big chunk of the workforce.
It is. And for small businesses, they are dropping the minimum corporate income tax. Plus, they rolled out a tax amnesty program covering unpaid income, estate, and value-added taxes, basically wiping out the associated penalties to get people back on the formal economic grid.
But the thing that really caught my eye, and something that directly impacts every single listener paying an electricity bill over there, was the push to amend the EPIRA law.
Oh, yeah, the systems loss issue.
Right. Consumers have been furious for years about being charged for systems loss. If you are a consumer paying an electricity bill in Manila, this systems loss tax means you are quite literally paying for power that vanished into thin air through inefficient transmission wires or illegal tapping before it even reached your meter.
It's basically paying for waste.
Exactly. And on top of that, they were paying a value-added tax on that lost electricity.
It's a massive friction point for the middle and lower classes. Prohibiting the charging of systems loss and removing its associated VAT is a direct mechanical move to lower a stubbornly high cost of living. But, lowering costs is only half the equation for a vulnerable nation.
What's the other half?
The other half is literal physical disaster proofing. The address details a massive shift from a reactive wait for the typhoon to hit approach to a highly predictive one.
Right. They laid out this entirely new logistics network.
Yeah.
It was 15 hubs, 76 spokes, and 919 last-mile facilities across the major island groups of Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao.
Which is an enormous supply chain overhaul.
It is. And instead of just listing these numbers, it's worth explaining why this matters. A hub-and-spoke model is basically how massive companies like Amazon guarantee two-day delivery.
Right. It's all about strategic placement.
Yeah. By placing 15 massive warehouses of supplies strategically, feeding into 76 regional distribution centers, the government's goal is to guarantee emergency relief delivery within 24 hours of a disaster, regardless of where it strikes.
And part of that new infrastructure includes the Ligtas Pinoy centers. These aren't just local school gymnasiums hastily repurposed for evacuees. These are engineered evacuation centers built to withstand super typhoon winds of 340 kilometers per hour and earthquakes up to an 8.4 magnitude.
That is heavy duty.
Yeah, and alongside this physical resilience, they are pushing to update the 25-year-old Ecological Solid Waste Management Act to modern standards. They want to integrate waste to energy tech simply because poor waste management fundamentally clogs drainage and exacerbates the very flooding they are trying to prevent.
It sounds like they're trying to upgrade the country's software and hardware at the same time. But here's where it gets really interesting. If you're exempting taxes and cutting consumer fees, how does the state fund 340-kilometer-per-hour wind-resistant bunkers?
What's fascinating here is the mechanism they are relying on to bridge that funding gap. It's all about digital efficiency and private capital. To fund these physical upgrades without draining the public treasury, the government is leaning aggressively into public-private partnerships, or PPPs.
Okay, let's break that down for the listener. A PPP means instead of the government paying for the whole bunker up front, they partner with private corporations who fund the construction.
Exactly.
And in return, those companies get long-term management contracts, toll rights, or tax incentives.
Right. And to attract that foreign and private investment in the first place, they established new green lanes for investors. Furthermore, they are banking heavily on the digital transformation of the government itself to grease the wheels.
And I noticed in the sources, they are betting heavily on their eGov app to do exactly that. They've got 56 million Filipinos using this app now.
That's a massive adoption rate.
Right. It seems their logic is that if you digitize a permit process or a tax payment, you don't just save time. You physically remove the local official who might create a bottleneck or ask for a bribe. You dramatically reduce bureaucratic red tape. And you stimulate domestic spending because doing business is suddenly faster and cheaper. In a way, digital efficiency itself becomes the funding mechanism.
It absolutely does. But, you know, you cannot build a modernized, predictive infrastructure, digital or physical, without an absolute guarantee of food and power. Which naturally leads us to the next major section of the address, the massive agrarian and energy overhaul.
And honestly, the scale of this part of the address was just staggering. Let's talk about food first. They announced the distribution of over 40,000 land titles, covering 50,000 hectares, to agrarian reform beneficiaries.
And we really have to emphasize the historical weight of this. Some of these farming families have been waiting for 30 to 60 years for these titles.
That's generations.
Yeah, in many cases, it's the grandchildren finally receiving the piece of paper their grandparents were originally promised.
60 years. And the government is completely writing off the debts of these beneficiaries this year. When you forgive that debt and hand over the title, you are unlocking dead capital. Those farmers can finally use that land as collateral to grow their businesses.
It changes the entire rural economy.
Add to that a push to plant 100 million coconut trees by 2028 and a massive expansion of crop insurance. We're talking a 10 billion peso payout over 4 years.
And the mechanism of that insurance is changing too. It's not just for the crops anymore. The insurance now covers livestock, machinery, and even life insurance for the farmers and fisherfolk themselves.
Which is huge.
Right, because if a farmer loses their expensive tractor in a flood, giving them a bag of seeds next season doesn't solve the problem. The government is finally treating agriculture not just as a traditional way of life, but as a critical industry that requires comprehensive risk management.
But modern agriculture and modern cities require massive amounts of energy. The state's goal is to add 10,000 megawatts of power to the grid by 2028, and they detailed a massive breakthrough on that front.
They really did.
The resumption of drilling operations led to the discovery of an untapped reserve of 222 billion cubic feet of natural gas.
To put the sheer volume of that into perspective, 222 billion cubic feet is enough natural gas to power 1.6 million households continuously for the next 8 years.
That is wild.
Having indigenous energy, meaning energy sourced from within your own borders, is a total game changer for national security. It means when a geopolitical conflict breaks out across the globe, your local lights don't go out.
And they aren't stopping at natural gas. They awarded a historic 14 petroleum service contracts, which is more than any single presidential term in their history.
Mm.
Notably, 2 of those contracts are co-managed with the Barn-M government, the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao.
Which is a major political milestone on its own.
Right. But then the address takes a sharp turn into the future. They are pushing into hydrogen power plants for off-grid areas and openly revisiting nuclear energy to reinforce security and bring down electricity costs.
Wait, let's pause right here.
Yeah.
We are talking about agrarian reform beneficiaries waiting 60 years for a piece of paper to own their farm.
Yep.
And in the exact same breath, in the exact same speech, we are talking about exploring hydrogen fuel and integrating nuclear power into the national grid.
Wait, we're talking about agrarian reform beneficiaries waiting 60 years for a piece of paper, and in the same breath, we're talking about hydrogen fuel and nuclear power. Isn't that an incredibly massive technological whiplash for the grid?
It sounds totally jarring, doesn't it? But looking closely at the expert analysis in our sources, it's actually a necessary whiplash.
How so?
It's like skipping the era of landline telephones entirely and jumping straight to 5G smartphones. A developing economy often realizes it cannot afford to step sequentially through history, you know? It must leapfrog legacy systems.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy. By securing baseline indigenous energy like that 222 billion cubic feet of gas and ensuring farmers have zero debt and full insurance, the state is trying to create a self-sufficient foundation.
Right. They realize they can't afford to build a 20th century grid in 2026. If they don't leapfrog straight to advanced tech like hydrogen and nuclear, they remain permanently held hostage by the global supply chain shocks that caused their energy emergency in the first place.
Which brings us to the ultimate destination of this roadmap. With food security stabilizing and a booming energy grid in the works, the address reveals the country's broader ambition. They are positioning themselves not just as a participant, but as a leader in the global technological and geopolitical arena. We're looking at the high-tech horizon.
And the foundation of that horizon is the workforce. The address highlighted that 1.8 million individuals, students, parents, and teachers have been formally trained in AI readiness.
1.8 million.
Yeah, and their technical and vocational education, or TVET programs, are boasting an 81% placement rate into jobs.
That's incredibly high. But, they're also keenly aware of the dark side of this rapid high-tech push. To counter it, they are introducing 10,000 school counselor associates into the public school system.
Which is so necessary right now.
And the reasoning provided was very specific. They need these counselors to combat the corrosive influence of fake news, the unfettered exposure to pornography, and the toxicity and hate culture pervasive in social media.
Mm.
They explicitly linked these digital issues to fueling mental health crises, teenage pregnancies, and HIV cases among the youth.
It shows an understanding that digital infrastructure requires psychological infrastructure. You can't just hand a tablet to a student, give them high-speed internet, and walk away hoping for the best.
Absolutely not.
And this holistic approach to the citizen extends to physical health as well. They are expanding universal health care through a preventative program called YACUP, which has already screened 4.5 million people.
And the medication reforms are huge for the average household. They made 75 essential medicines completely free, up to a 10,000 peso limit per member per year. Furthermore, they completely removed the value-added tax from over 2,000 medicines.
Specifically targeting drugs for cancer, hypertension, diabetes, and mental health, right? Yeah. The logic here is highly strategic. A healthy, mentally resilient, and AI-trained workforce is exactly what allows a nation to aggressively maneuver on the global economic stage.
Right.
And because of this workforce, they now have 23 free trade agreements in force or under negotiation. They are also building the PX Silica Industrial Hub as part of the Luzon Economic Corridor.
Now, for those wondering why a silica hub matters, silica is the foundational material used to manufacture semiconductors and advanced microchips. By building an industrial hub focused entirely on AI-driven advanced manufacturing around this material, they're trying to move aggressively up the global technology supply chain rather than just exporting raw materials.
Exactly. And then came perhaps the most surprising reveal of the entire address.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
Cagayan, a province in the northern part of the country, is being primed to act as the country's first official spaceport. They are slated to launch a sounding rocket into space next year in partnership with the South Korean aerospace company.
Okay. A spaceport in Cagayan. That sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. But grounding this back to reality, how does a country protect its citizens from the corrosive influence of fake news and social media toxicity while simultaneously integrating AI into its core economy?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, space exploration isn't just about astronauts planting flags, it's highly practical. Launching their own satellites gives them independent capabilities for disaster management.
Like monitoring those 340-kilometer-per-hour typhoons before they hit.
Exactly. It allows for precision agricultural monitoring for those farmers who just got their titles. And crucially, it provides independent maritime surveillance to protect their sovereign waters.
Which ties perfectly into the philosophical core of this address. The government isn't just trying to build infrastructure, they're trying to build a highly resilient national identity.
They really are. The address explicitly defined this identity. A people who are gracious, noble, and do not yield. You see this directly in their geopolitical stance. They reiterated a firm, non-negotiable position on the 2016 UNCLO Arbitral Award.
And for context, NNCLS stands for the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which essentially dictates the rules for international waters and exclusive economic zones.
Right.
The address highly praised the armed forces, Coast Guard, and local fisherfolk who patrol and assert their rights in those contested seas.
And you see this push for stability domestically, too. The address highlighted the peaceful completion of the pact with the CBA-CPLA.
Who are they, exactly?
These are former armed rebel groups in the Northern Cordillera region, and finalizing this pact effectively brings decades of local insurgency to a close. They also highlighted the preparation for the first regular parliamentary election in the Bangsamoro region, the Borem, down south.
So they are striving for internal peace while projecting external sovereignty. They are attempting to cultivate a citizen who refuses to yield to territorial threats, but who is simultaneously highly educated, AI literate, and physically healthy enough to compete in advanced global manufacturing. It is an incredibly ambitious national profile.
It really is. So let's take a step back and look at the sheer scope of the source material we've just unpacked today.
It's a lot.
You and I have just navigated a developmental roadmap that literally starts in the mud, digging out corrupt flood control money and fighting off the immediate economic shockwaves of a Middle Eastern war with targeted cash relief.
And from there, we mapped out the mechanisms behind building 340-kilometer-per-hour wind-resistant bunkers using private capital, the wiping away of 60-year-old agrarian debts to unlock dead capital, and the discovery of enough indigenous natural gas to power 1.6 million homes for nearly a decade to insulate the country from global shocks.
Right, and the roadmap ends with the construction of AI-driven semiconductor hubs, distributing 10,000 counselors to fight the psychological toll of social media, and launching sounding rockets from a brand new spaceport in Cagayan to monitor their own seas.
To you listening right now, whether you are a student, an entrepreneur, an investor, or just someone who is insanely curious about how the world works, this blueprint matters.
It absolutely does.
Watching a nation of this size, with this specific strategic location, attempt to adapt to the 21st century by leapfrogging legacy systems impacts global trade, international technology supply chains, and regional security for absolutely everyone on the planet.
It really leaves us with a profound, lingering question to consider on our own.
What's that?
As nations begin to aggressively leapfrog traditional linear development, simultaneously adopting AI ecosystems, space exploration, and nuclear energy, while still dealing with fundamental issues like typhoons, agricultural debt, and updating 25-year-old solid waste management laws, does the very definition of a developing nation need to be completely rewritten?
It really makes you wonder. If a country can launch a rocket into the stratosphere to monitor its borders, but is simultaneously still perfecting its garbage collection to prevent local flooding on the ground, what does the future of global development and equality actually look like? Are we moving into an era where a nation can and must exist in two different centuries at the exact same time just to survive?
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about.
Thank you so much for taking this deep dive into the source material with us today. We'll catch you on the next one.